Welcome back to Newsviews, and my guest this morning is candidate for Chicago Mayor Gery Chico. Let's talk about the schools, public schools. You, of course, were directly involved with that in your position as school board president earlier in your career. My first question is, the person who heads up CPS, should it be an administrator, business person, like a Ron Huberman type, or no, should it be an educator?
I think you need two people at the top. You need a CEO who is well-versed in business administration, and finance. And right alongside that person, you need a chief education officer, somebody who's familiar with curriculum, education methods. And those are the two positions that should be at the top of the system. Why? When I went to the Chicago Public Schools in 1995, the system was on meltdown because of a financial collapse. Not anything that was being done necessarily in the education realm, but they affect one another. I think it would be unfair to give strictly an educator the responsibility for, again, another $6.5 billion system who doesn't have the financial and administrative wherewithal to run that system. They can work very nicely together. I did this with Paul Vallis, who was CEO, and right alongside of him were several successful educators that made it work. We raised test scores 6 years in a row, and we brought that budget into balance from $1.3 billion in deficit to, when I left, $350 million in surplus. This can be done. This structure can work.
Aside from the money aspects of this, what's the biggest change you would like to see affected there within public schools?
Longer school day, longer school year, and more preschools. We have to have more time spent learning. That's going to give us time to have a richer curriculum, and it's going to keep children out of harm's way. Right now, we have one of the shortest school days and years in the country. We can do better than that. We're going to have to rearrange our government here as well. I called for a slashing of the central bureaucracy by 1/3 to begin freeing up the resources necessary to pay for these things. And
if you need more teachers for this, obviously?
You may not. You may use the same amount of teachers longer periods of time, and you'll have to negotiate with them, and I'm prepared to do that. We did it before when we had the nation's longest school year with the summer school program, and if you recall, we added 2.5 hours on the end of the day before, and we ended up having a third meal of the day dinner for a lot of our students, because that's where they got their 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Rely more upon charter schools, or no? Some people say that takes away from investing in the neighborhood schools.
But you got to remember, I am pro-charter school. Charter schools are public schools, and they serve our children and our communities. And right now, there's nearly 40,000 children being educated in charter schools. But please understand this. They have to be held accountable to standards of performance just the way our public schools are. We can't give anybody a free pass. And if a charter is not performing, then we have to look at revoking that charter.
The teachers union seems to be in support of electing school board members. Good idea or bad?
I think it's a bad idea, because the last thing we need in Chicago right now, as we're going about bringing back our school system to the level that we want, is 13 new politicians who are all going to be out there running for office, raising money, becoming elected. Who are you accountable at that point? I'd rather, I as mayor, want to have the responsibility of bringing this school system back to a level of performance that excites parents. That's what I'm after. And the only way we're going to get that is if the school board is appointed and all on the same page to make this system premier again.
Before we go any further, I want to get back around. I could have asked you earlier when we were talking about police, for instance, but the idea that you're going to look at the residency requirement and perhaps relax it, allow Chicago police officers, firefighters to live outside the city limits. Some might say, well, wait a minute, though. I mean, obviously, you might be losing property taxes, perhaps, if people suddenly move and there's a vacuum left behind. Is that a concern? Why is this so important?
Well, it's not. It was more important to the groups of people that put questions to the candidates. And so Rahm Emanuel and I answered this question exactly the same. We're willing to talk about it, and that's all we've said so far, Alan. Nobody's doing anything about relaxing a residency requirement.
What would be the benefits of it? Aside from firefighters and police officers who say, I'd love to live whatever nearby.
Well, that's about where it is right now. This is a question that they put to the candidates, asking if we would talk about it. I happen to think after 40 years, it's not an unhealthy thing to put these issues on the table for discussion only. And let's see where we go. But I'm not prepared to relax that requirement yet.
Any concerns that the further you move away, the further you are away from emergency resources that are necessary?
That's one of the issues.
Should something big happen?
That is exactly one of the issues that we have to talk. There's a lot of cons to this dropping this requirement, so we are not doing it yet. We merely said that we would talk about the issue as requested by several groups.
All right, back to city finances. The legislature talked about it, didn't act upon it. I'm talking about the casino now. The possibilities of there one being in the city of Chicago and apparently owned by the city of Chicago. Is that your thinking on that?
Yes.
If it were to happen, the city should own that license?
I want the city of, first of all, I think a casino would be good for Chicago. Everybody else around us has it. They're taking our money. We ought to try to keep the money in Chicago. I want the city to own the casino, operate it, and it could be as much as $200 million or more a year for the city. But here's what we have to do. While we're looking at a source of revenue like that, we cannot tax people anymore. We're going to break their back. And this thing that I call the ROM tax is just not the way to go. I don't want to spread this tax to services that heretofore haven't been taxed.
You want the Super Bowl to come to Chicago. That'd be your plan. Of course, we got Soldier Field there. The grass quality now doesn't hold up very well in the wintertime, and obviously it has no dome. Is this a good idea in February to have the Super Bowl in Chicago?
We call it bear weather for a reason.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. Football was meant to be played in adverse conditions. But just because it's the Super Bowl, we drop all pretense of football? No way. Chicago can host this. This is a $500 to $600 million economic boon to this city, and we should pursue those things. It's jobs, it's hotel rooms, it's restaurants, it's exposure for our city. And the only thing that would be better than my proposal to bring the Super Bowl here would be if the Bears were hosting it.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Candidate for Chicago Mayor Gery Chico. Great to have you here once again. Looking forward to seeing this as this very exciting campaign underway, that's for sure. I'm Alan Krashesky. That's going to wrap up News Views on this Sunday morning. And should have an interesting Super Bowl this evening, too, but let's get back to the news for now.